What is up, everybody? RLTK Podcast. Jordan here, kicking it with Chris. Chris, what's good, my boy?
Man,
don't do it.
Let's just get into the podcast, man. Let's just get into the podcast.
Man.
Look. All right, look. Let me say this, man. It's still our year. Let me tell you. Let me tell you how. Let me tell you why I know that.
Okay.
I saw the ancestors last night.
Wow, that's why you come in looking like African Bombada?
Exactly. I saw the ancestors. It's gonna be all right.
It's not.
You know,
some people got us not making the playoffs. Some people got us not making the playoffs no more.
That's every year. Look,
but we have a hard schedule this year, though.
God, you know, we play the Ravens.
Play the Ravens this week.
Father.
Then we play somebody easy, I think. But then it's like the Steelers,
we ain't
Texans, 49ers, Detroit.
Oh, Texas won.
We got like all type of teams that could beat us. So anyways, it is what it is. But
I'm just saying,
we just gonna have to go down with the shit, bro. We've been running our mouth and it just is what it is.
Bro, we got cooked.
Yeah, it's crazy. Let's not talk about it.
Yeah, it's not.
Anyways.
That's not.
Let's get into what we mean to get into today. So last time we was talking about discipline, right? Spiritual discipline. Yeah. And then at the end of the conversation, we was like, man, it'd be really cool to dive into the concept of wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think it ties to spiritual discipline because spiritual discipline, like wisdom is necessary for spiritual discipline if you think about it.
Absolutely.
And I think wisdom
absolutely
may be one of the main things that this generation needs.
Yeah.
Being able to engage the world that they live in a way that honors God, in a way that is productive and prosperous for them, right? And allows them to sift through all the nonsense and confusion that exists in our culture. You know what I mean?
I agree with that.
And so I guess a good place to start would be,
I agree.
What exactly is wisdom?
Oh, man. I've been asking that question for a very long time. Ever since I got introduced to Proverbs. I've been asking that question for a long time, man. And I really exactly don't have a really firm understanding of what it is, but I can speak on its purpose or its duty to some degree. This is a very broad word. It's not. Wisdom has this sense of ancient knowledge to it. In a sense of a divine or experiential understanding of existence. It's a weighty word, and like when you look at Proverbs, it even talks about it like in the sense of what it has to say. There's no crookedness into it. It's straight. It talks about in all you're getting, get wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then wisdom
says it's the most important thing.
It's the most important thing. And then when wisdom speaks in chapter 8, it says, I have all the things I have to say. There's no crookedness and it's straight. So in a sense, wisdom acknowledges the integral structure of truth, right? It speaks to how things operate in this metaphysical realm of laws. And if you obey it, listen to it, things can go well for you, right? But also that's Proverbs, because we haven't even got into all of wisdom literature in the sense of Ecclesiastes and Job, because they speak to, I think Job, Ecclesiastes, and Proverbs speaks to different sections of what humans wrestle with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Job really wrestles with sovereignty, right? I think that speaks to the sovereignty of God and who is in ultimate control. I think wisdom wants you to know who is actually in control. And I think Proverbs, and this is just a brief like brief, so brief, right? And this is just from my observation, what I've been reading. But I think it's profound to me though, because Job speaks about sovereignty, but Proverbs speaks about our relationship to that, right? Our relationship to the sovereignty of God, because it tells us the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of it, the beginning of knowing. That's pretty profound to me. And then Ecclesiastes is the man who has observed absurdity, right? He just didn't accomplish great things and did all things and had every desire you can think of. He dived into madness and foolishness while still holding on to the wisdom that God has given him. He studied the absurdity of existence, and he said it all was vanity. And at the end, he said, "What, fear God and obey His commandments." So he still goes back to Proverbs. He acknowledges that Proverbs is right, and so there is a mystery to wisdom, because I can't really pinpoint it. And when I say wisdom is Jesus, I mean, it's accurate, but what do you mean by that? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you ask me what is wisdom, I would say that wisdom is a tool that speaks about the integral structure of truth.
Okay.
That's why I say
like
wisdom is. Yeah.
I think if I was going to answer the question in a more practical sense, it would be that wisdom is the knowledge that comes from, or the wisdom is the experience that comes from knowledge applied. Right. And so I think wisdom's a little bit different from knowledge, right? Because you can know something or know a fact or know a theory or understand something, but when you've actually like attempted to apply that knowledge and gone through the process of experiencing what it takes to apply it, that's where you learn wisdom. It's kind of like, okay, I can go to business school and I can learn the theory of starting a business and know all the nuts and bolts and practicalities of doing it. And then there's me actually trying to do it and failing and dealing with people and losing money and making money and dealing with taxes and like all the little nuances and all the things that are a part of that process that you don't really learn about until you engage in the process. You see what I'm saying?
Experiential knowledge.
Then, exactly. Yep. And then like the lack of control you actually have over success, but that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Facts. Yeah.
And then so like it's really interesting because Proverbs speaks to that, right? Like, okay, here are these generally observable things that you can do, and if you do these things, generally speaking, you will have success.
Yeah.
But then I think what we see in Ecclesiastes and what we see in Job, like quite clearly, is that ultimately you can do the right things and it still not work out the way you want it to.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are also people who do the wrong things, and in the Old Testament, it's called the retribution principle.
Yeah.
People who like do the wrong things and have success.
Yeah.
But that success could actually be their condemnation.
Yeah.
So like in some cases, it is actually wisdom that you don't get what you want.
Exactly.
God's wisdom.
Yeah.
And actually you getting what you want is condemnation and judgment, which is crazy to think about. It kind of flips all of the upside down on its head. But
I think because you have to ask the question, what is the purpose of wisdom? Why did God give us the ability to, why is God giving us wisdom? And I think he spoke to it like we said in the last podcast, the world doesn't know how to reward it. It doesn't know how to give wisdom its proper reward, its proper flowers. It doesn't know how to do that. Because one, it doesn't even know what it is, right? There's too many thoughts on it. I think the main purpose, let me not say that, I'm sorry. I think one of the purposes of wisdom is to preserve oneself. Okay. And I think I
like that.
Right. I think when you read Proverbs, there are these practical benefits of the things that can happen to you. and it sounds amazing. Then when you read Ecclesiastes, it's like everything can go absolutely wrong for you.
Mhm.
Right.
It's possible.
And so then if I'm applying wisdom and I'm supposed to reap the rewards of wisdom, but when I read Ecclesiastes and he's saying, look, the battle is not always given to the strong, or wealth or bread to the wise, or wealth to the intelligent. Time and chance happens to them all. He says, well, what is the point of it? I think it's to preserve one's character, to preserve one's moral and ethical foundation. I think it's to preserve your mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Wisdom helps put you in your rightful place.
Exactly.
It helps you put yourself in your place in the world, because
exactly,
once you recognize like how the world functions and the reality of the things that you're not in control of, there's almost a freedom that can come in that, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
now I'm free to enjoy whatever God gives me in this life. Whatever
Yeah.
he puts in my hand,
Yeah.
I'm free to enjoy that.
Yeah.
Accept that for what it is,
Mhm.
right? And like enjoy the simplicities of existing,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
and worship him in those simplicities.
Yep.
I think, and like to kind of transition that a little bit, I guess, to like how this pertains to Gen Z, or how this pertains to students today, Gen A as well.
Mm.
I think about how complex their world is, how vast it is, like how many options, how many possibilities there are now, right? Because of technology. Like I even think about it in the context of like dating, right? So before you wanted to date somebody, you just dated whoever was in your area.
Yeah.
That was your mating pool, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like you can literally pick anybody in the world.
Yeah.
That is option overload.
You can start a relationship in Japan if you
Correct.
want to. Yeah. I agree.
I mean people are picking people who ain't even human, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So, like we've just ventured into, and so
Oh yeah.
and so once again, I think like the vastness of the options that we have spun us out of control a little bit. Dare I say, made us a little bit crazy. And so I think what wisdom does is kind of like helps you apply those restraints again, so that you can view the world in a way that actually is profitable for you and helps you understand your place and space in it, so that you can live a life that you can actually enjoy and enjoy God while you live it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think the reason why wisdom is so important for Gen Z and Gen A is because they live in that world, they're starving for it. They're starving for some information, some knowledge, some wisdom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That can simplify and help them make sense of their reality. Because their reality is complex and confusing.
I agree with that. Well, just to add to that, I think two things we can discuss is one, practicality. Pragmatism was practical, and structure. I think Proverbs speaks to the things that are obvious, right? It speaks to I think it speaks to what is observed, and but also I think we don't want what is observed because we don't like the reward of what is observed, right? I don't think.
What do you mean?
So like, marriage, for example, right? I think it's understood that talking about relationships, right? I think it's understood that monogamy is I think it is the way to go. I think I think monogamy is a practical thing to understand, that is how men and women are made to function in society, right? I think that's a practical thing to understand. But if you observe what's going on in monogamy, you don't want that. So you create other lanes for the ideal of relations.
That's a good point.
Right?
Because I think to that point, young people have observed their parents, people of influence in their lives, not be faithful in their marriages, or just live lives where they've compromised certain things, or not taking care of their family or whatever else, and they're like, I don't want nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go and try something else entirely.
Yep.
Or like, why would I listen to you when this is the the consistent result I see as a consequence of following that line of logic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. I think part of it is for them because of social media and also just because of like the general degradation of society in a postmodern era, right? They've just seen a bunch of stuff not work and they're just like, we're not having it.
Yeah.
Although a lot of those things that they've seen not work, they've just seen people not properly apply the wisdom that's necessary to make those things work.
Right.
They've just thrown the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Throwing it all away and then completely rejecting the structure of that thing you're observing. So I think like the things that we can discuss for Gen Z is what is practical and what is made to be structured in society, design itself. Because I think it's fascinating when you read Proverbs 8, wisdom talks about how it was there when everything was made. You know, I was there when the mountains was formed. You know what I mean? And so it's like it understands design. It understands natural law. It understands all the laws, actually, metaphysically. And so it has a lot to say. But the thing about it, though,
what's interesting is early church understanding was Proverbs 8 was talking about. That's Jesus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, once again, it comes back to the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, right? Like, that's the source you go to get wisdom.
What do you think? Well, what does the fear of the Lord mean?
I mean, I think it means to, like, put God in his rightful place, to revere him, right? And I think if you put God in his rightful place, then it reorders everything. It reorients everything else, right? And so we put God in his rightful place, and then God reorders our lives and how we view it. And that's the beginning of wisdom because we start to walk in the way that he designed us to walk, right? Because I was thinking about this the other day. It's not just like when God calls something good, right?
Yeah.
It's good because he created it, but he also created a particular way.
Yeah.
And to be used a particular way or to do a particular thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's implicit in God calling it good. Right? It's not just that it was created, it's what it's created and used for.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're not supposed to take that thing and then use it for something else. In the Old Testament, that's the definition of evil. Yeah. Taking something that God has created and using it for something other than it was created for.
Yeah.
Right? And we do that all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Man, I'll imagine I can't even imagine the trickling down.
Wisdom is returning to that, right? So it's returning to using the things that God has created in the way that he has called us to use them. Now, because of sin and corruption, it doesn't always mean that things are going to work out the way we want them to. Ultimately, they will.
Yeah.
But right now, they may not.
That's fascinating. All right, let me ask you this. Do you think, how do I say it? Because we're talking about fearing the Lord, right? Putting God in his right place, putting God in his proper place, and everything will fall under. You think that's practical?
To do what?
To put God in his right place.
What do you mean when you say practical?
So do you think it's observable to know that you can put God in the right place, in his proper position? You think that's practical? Or you think that's complex?
I think it's an act of God. I think it's an act of God to put God in his rightful place. So I would say it is both practical, but more than that, it's transcendent, it's spiritual, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So God has to, like, I have to see God, and when I see him, that reorients everything because it's revelation, right? It's kind of like when something's revealed to you and it reorders everything. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like you learn something and it's like your eyes are open and you're like, oh, shoot, that changes everything.
Yeah.
That's literally what happens.
Yeah.
But on a supernatural, transcendent level. Right? And
yeah.
so then I reorder my life around the things that God calls me to reorder my life around.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Ooh, yeah.
But I think when it comes to Proverbs, as I'm thinking about it now, I think like as youth leaders, as pastors, as teachers, coaches, one of the most practical things we can do is literally crack Proverbs open and read it with young people.
Oh, facts. Yeah.
Like there's just so much there.
Yeah.
I just like vividly remember going on campus and being like talking through the concept of anger. And I think we shared the proverb that a man without restraint is like a city without walls.
Ooh, yeah.
And I remember kids being like, yo, that is crazy. That is so true. Like I was just outside
Yeah.
about to fight somebody, and I totally can see how I was a city without walls in that moment.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think one of the easiest ways for this next generation to enter into the text is wisdom literature. I know that, like, for us, it was like, hey, read the Gospel of John. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I think there's something there for this generation, and I think they can connect with that stuff because they're looking for guidance, they're looking for mentorship, they're looking for somebody to help them make sense of their life, right? And I think the wisdom literature of the scriptures can do that. I think it can mentor them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I would say crack open Proverbs with a young person, man. Or even just start quoting Proverbs to them, like, yo, what do you think about this? What do you think about, like, yo, where did you get that from?
Yeah.
Like, where do you read that?
Yeah.
And here's what's crazy. Like, most of these kids, like, now they don't never crack open the Bible.
Yeah.
Don't even, like, they've never read it.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's this opportunity to introduce them to, like, something they've never been introduced to before.
Mm.
Most kids are not going to be like, oh, I've heard that Jesus stuff. I don't want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
A lot of them haven't heard it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so there's this opportunity to introduce, or like at least not that particular piece, at least the Proverbs. Like, yo, the Bible has wisdom like that. What else does it have to offer? What else can I find in this?
Yeah, if they'll figure out that the Bible can actually relate to you more than you think it can.
100%, bro.
You know, facts. It actually can relate. But I think I guess the one thing that I like to go back a little bit, I think to some degree it is practical to understand that there is a place in your heart. I think it can be observed. I think the fear of the Lord is an observable value.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be seen because
oh, you mean like you can observe it in somebody else?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I would agree with that. Absolutely.
I do agree with the idea that it has to be divine. Now I agree with that 100%, but I do think if God is telling me to fear him, he had to give me the capabilities to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when I look at Gen Z, I see that function in them, but it's just implied in sexuality, politics, money, aesthetics.
You mean they're worshiping those things instead of God?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a thing that we can discuss and what that actually means for them, right? Because they show very proper reverence for other things.
That's good. That's a good point, bro.
You know
That's a really good point.
And so
they do.
And so how can we help Gen Z to help them? How can we help Gen Z to see that, to showing God proper reverence can order your life way more better than you think it could? You know what I mean? And so I do think the function of the fear of the Lord is observable. It can be seen. In Gen Z.
Well, I mean, to kind of answer your question / statement, I think, number one, we got to apply it to our own lives. So am I living out the wisdom of the scriptures, right? Yeah. So am I doing the things that it says to do? And then when there's opportunity and the young person is like, yo, why do you do that way? You know what I'm saying? Well, I do it this way because, hey, why don't you look at women as they walk past? Yeah. Well, Proverbs says, keep my eyes level at all times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so here's why I do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it gives opportunity for conversation. And so I think living it out yourself first is obviously important. I think
showing them the structure.
Cracking it. Yeah, exactly. Showing them how it actually affects somebody's life, right? Yeah. The implications of it. Mm-hmm. And it comes back to what we were saying before, like, why is somebody going to want to follow Jesus if I look like following Jesus is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If there's no joy in my life, if there's no excitement, how am I representing to them that, like, the fruits of the Spirit, in him there's fullness of joy? And once again, I'm not saying there isn't suffering. I'm not saying there aren't dark, difficult moments in your faith journey. I think there absolutely is. But I think also, like, in the midst of those things, we learn how to be joyful. We still have peace that transcends those circumstances supernaturally. There are all different types of things that God does. And I think we have to carry ourselves in a way that demonstrates that to people. And I think it'll have them ask questions. The other one, like I said, cracking open the scriptures with them, which probably comes last, I would think. And then the other two things I would think about is sharing stories and then asking questions. Like, one of the easiest ways to share wisdom is to share stories, right? And I think this is the thing with young people. So as we know, they don't want to be told what to do, right? They live in a decentralized, unauthoritarian world, right?
Well, I think that's every person that's under the age of 20 doesn't want to be told what to do.
True. However, I think technology has had a unique effect on how young people think about authority. Because, like, for example, you and I didn't want to be told what to do by our parents. But at the end of the day, we fundamentally understood we probably going to have to do what they say.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, we understood with teachers and schools and different things of that nature, so we had to do what they say. Young people now tend to not really care.
Got you.
Yeah. And I think part of that is the decentralization of their world. It is the idea that social media kind of feeds us, which is all of our opinions matter equally, right? And so my opinion matters equally at work. It matters as much as my boss's at work. When the truth is, it doesn't. Sorry. If he runs the joint, what he says means more than what you say in this specific context.
Yeah.
That doesn't have anything to do with humanity or those types of things. But in the context of this institution, this structure, what he has to say means more than what you have to say.
Yeah.
And I think, once again, they live in a world where everybody's opinion's equal. And the truth is, even in that space, everybody's opinion isn't equal. Because if you're a famous person, what you have to say has way more value.
Yeah.
It's just the illusion of it being equal, right?
Yeah.
The illusion of it being decentralized, because you could make the argument it's actually not.
Yeah.
But that shaped them, I think, to perceive the world that way. So I think when a young person comes to you and asks you for wisdom, sharing stories of how you may have gone through a similar experience, I think, is really helpful. And here's why. You're not telling them what to do. You're not telling them that, like, hey, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. You're just sharing, hey, this is what happened in my life. Here's how I made a similar decision or the same decision. Here was the implications of it. If I could do it all again, I'd probably do this. And then let them decide.
Yeah, I agree. I like to ask questions,
which is the other one.
That's my favorite.
I think asking questions also is a really impactful, powerful way of helping somebody discern what the wise thing to do is.
I love that.
And the reason is because
that's the best route.
You get to sit there and draw things out of people, have them stare their ideas in the mirror, right? And ultimately, I think that questioning creates space for somebody to engage with God, to engage with the Spirit.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think God can intervene in that moment, bring wisdom, bring revelation, bring clarity, right?
Yeah.
That I can't bring.
Yeah.
I can't reveal. But what I can do is ask questions and create space for God to reveal.
Yeah.
I can set an atmosphere, a space for God to do that, right? With the questions that I ask.
It's opener.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about this thing. It's like, okay, bet. Well, here's what you want to do. Cool. Like, what do you think the wise thing is to do? Why? Okay, bet. Like, do you have any other sources of wisdom? Okay, cool. Well, I look to the Bible as a source of wisdom. The scriptures would say this. What do you think about that? What do you think is more true? The wisdom that you hold to now, or the wisdom that you just heard from the scriptures? Why or why not? Now we're having a little bit different of a dialogue. And once again, I'm not telling them what they should do, but I'm presenting them with some information that could be incredibly transformative for their life and could lead them in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
And so I think how we present it, the context in which we present it, and then presenting it understanding the things that shape young people and how they interpret what we say is really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's very important to ask questions too, because I can't stop asking, what do you think that means? I love that. And the reason why is because I want to see what do you actually believe? And
Yep.
it's because before you try to give someone else a different worldview, you have to understand their own first.
Correct.
And
That's good.
and listen, man, like, I think there's three things, right? I think there's forms of arguments. I think there is emotional maturity, and I also think there's moral and ethical landscapes that we have to really dive into, especially with young people, right? People are very argumentative today, right? And people are coming. Some people actually know how to argue, you
True.
know, and but their fundamental position is incorrect. But I think, like, knowing how to talk to young people, I think the best thing is to ask questions, but also it's work upon ourselves to understand their moral and ethical landscape, to understand where their ideas come from. You have to see what is the foundation that they stand on for what they believe in, right? And so it's a lot of work, and 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 having conversations with young people, because when you have conversations with people, man, they get mad so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the culture we live in today in America. We're easily offended. We're hyperly emotional. There is no maturity. And that's the thing about wisdom. Like, as a side note, but it's interesting because I noticed when it's time to go deep into the things of wisdom, it requires emotional maturity. Like, you have to be emotionally mature to understand the deepness of things. Because if you're not, you just get offended. Because we're no
Stare
longer.
some really difficult things in the face.
Yes. So I think wisdom has more difficult things to say than actually pleasing things to say, enlightened things, right? I think it has more difficult truths to discuss than things that will, provoke a philosophical conversation. I think it's more like, no, this is the truth and this is what it is. And these are the words of wisdom. I'm like, oh man, dude, you know what I mean? And because Proverbs talks about these tough things, bro, like in the sense of why those who entertain sin love death. I'm like,
yikes.
I'm like, okay, I got you for sure. Just things that are difficult, really hard to grasp, bro. And so that's another thing that we have to help Gen Z with. We have to help them to become emotionally mature.
That's good.
Because if we're going to have deep conversations with Gen Z, they're not going to be ready for it because they're hyper emotional, right? Now, I'm not saying that's all of them. And I'm not even trying to pick at Gen Z. I'm picking at society because it's all of us are like that. But I'm trying to point out a reality is, if you want to have a deep conversation with Gen Z, if you want to get them to that place of understanding something, then you have to be aware of their emotional maturity, of what they can take and what they cannot take. And it's and partially, you really can't blame them for this, man. You can't be mad at that. You just have to understand where they are in society. And that's what anybody that you have a conversation with. If you want to dive deep, see where their emotional maturity level is at. Because if it's low, then understand you can't go deep with them. You know what I mean? And so I think that's another thing that we have to help Gen Z with, in the regards of understanding what is wise. They have to be emotionally mature, because wisdom goes against the will of man. I think it does, because the will of man is opposite of what God wants, because we want what we want. So there's a friction there, right? Paul, I do I do what do you say? I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and so I mean, that's what I think, man. I think there's a lot to discuss here when it comes to wisdom itself. It's broad. It's hard to understand, but I think we can understand what it's here for. And I think what it's here for is to help us to understand the structure of truth, to help us to understand who's actually in authority, who's actually sovereign, who actually looks over and see and has determined things, and how you can actually have a relationship with the one who has determined all things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah, it's good, bro. Yeah, I think as I think about engaging with young people, like you said, man, that emotional maturity piece is going to be so important. But I think we got to hold space for their emotions. And like I talked about on previous podcasts with Spiritual Formation Society stuff and the Wesleyan term orthopathy, like giving your inner life to God. I think part of the process is, and maybe this is part of wisdom too, and I can't think of any proverbs off the top of my head that point to this, but a man without restraint is like a city without walls. I mean, that points to emotion on some level, right? I think the reality is we have to teach them that wisdom is the restraint of emotions in certain circumstances and situations. But ultimately, I think in all things, it's the ability to give those emotions over to the Lord, give those emotions over to God, to experience them, and then invite Him into them, instead of allowing them, our emotions, essentially to become gods that rule our mind and rule our bodies and rule our thoughts and essentially rule how we function, right? And the decisions that we make in this world. And so
that's good.
Yeah, when you say really difficult things to young people, especially if you're having a one-on-one conversation, I think it's important to be cognizant of like how far you can actually push this conversation before you lose them, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because there's only so far you can go, and it's like, well, if I go any further, I could say this thing, and if I say this thing, I'll be making the point that I want to make. But if I make that point right now,
that's good.
I'm going to lose them.
That's good.
Guess what? You're probably not applying wisdom if you just go ahead and say the thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so the very thing that you're trying to teach them, or the very thing you're trying to lead them in, you're actually working against. Yeah. Because just like them, sometimes we can be guilty of being prideful and falling into, well, I've got to tell them this way right now.
Yeah.
They need to hear the truth, brother.
I think God does us like that.
What do you mean?
I think there's a lot of things that when I look at my life in relationship with God, like there's a desire to know truth, but I also understand my heart's wicked. And I have to beg the question of what does my relationship with truth look like? And when I look at, like, let's say truth and my wicked heart, they have a relationship. And that doesn't seem right. But God has allowed it. He has allowed truth to have a relationship with my wicked heart. And it is called to work on my heart. So there are a lot of things God doesn't show me. Because what is my wicked heart going to do to that truth? Twist it, turn it around, not accept it because it's too hard. Harden yourself. Because sometimes God tells you things and you like,
no, I'm not doing that.
Right? And so I think there is a relationship between truth and the heart of man. And it is wise that God doesn't tell me things sometimes because
for my own good.
That's
a good point, bro.
And so
that's a great point.
I think there is
sometimes you don't tell young people certain things for their own good. They're not ready to hear it.
Yeah. And it's not because we
don't care about them.
Don't care.
It's because we do care.
It's because we care.
and that's not the right moment.
Because I have to worry about how you respond to this, right? And
Yeah, let the gospel be a stumbling block by itself. It's
On
a
its
stumbling
own.
block enough.
it's on its own, right? And that's fascinating, bro. That truth requires maturity to handle it. Because if you're not mature emotionally, you can't handle the truth. That's right. You can't handle the truth. Right? So, I mean, that's why Proverbs speaks about the gentle tongue, right? The wise, their words are like water. It's refreshing. We should have refreshing words for people.
That's
right?
good.
Our words should be like water on a sunny day. And I think because the truth is difficult, bro.
That's good.
And so,
Yeah, that makes me think, bro, like as I think about wisdom and what it means, and as I'm just like even trying to grow as a godly man myself, like as I'm reading that book, Disciplines the Godly Man by Kent Hughes, one of the things he talks about is like the discipline of the tongue. I can't wait till you get there.
yeah. We gonna talk.
It's not fun.
Yeah, I bet.
So, what he talks about,
I bet it ain't.
he talks about like criticism, bro,
Mm.
and like being overly critical is like not godly. That's where he goes, and I'm like,
being.
ooh.
Well, is he making a distinction between correction and
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. But his point is like, you know, if you're the person who's always pointing out the one or two things that are wrong, you know what I'm saying? And then it makes me think of Ephesians 6, right? Like, fathers, do not exasperate your children, right? And so I think that's one of the ways you can do it. But I think about that in the context of like leading young people.
Mm.
Like, I think there's a ton of wisdom in encouraging them and calling out the good in them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And calling
I love
out the
that.
great things that you see in them.
Yeah.
Right. And not just being like, you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong and you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong. And that's not my struggle with, just keeping it a stack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But I'm mad self-critical too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so, I think maybe wisdom, like as we're talking about it in terms of being gentle and that refreshing word, right?
Yeah.
And saying those hard things, not saying that those hard things should never be said.
Yeah.
I just wonder if we should be saying the gentle, encouraging, loving things way more than we say the hard, critical things. Does
That's
that
a
make
good
sense?
question. Yeah, that's a very good question. Would you say it depends on how deep the relationship is? Right?
Yes and no. Because
Okay.
I'm thinking about it as like a general principle of wisdom. Like, is it wise for me to just in general encourage young people based on the stage, the station they find themselves at in life, the place they are, the things they're struggling with, their body's changing, everything's confusing, they're trying to figure out who they are, they're making a bunch of mistakes, which we made or are still currently making.
Yep.
And they have like, they're trying to figure out who God is, right? And whether they're going to follow him or not. And so it's like, should I, when they're in that place, focus on encouraging and calling out the good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that wisdom for them? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I would say, well, I would mostly say, I think you can communicate truth through a gentle tongue. I think you can, because Proverbs also talks about the wounds of a friend can be trusted, but the enemy gives you multiple kisses. And so I think we have to understand. Well, now we're entering word.
You asked the question, when do you wound? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like you just run around shanking people.
Yeah.
Like, you can get it. You can get it.
I
know what you did last night.
Get this work.
I saw that text message.
Yeah.
I saw that Snapchat. I saw that Instagram. You know what I'm saying? You're just working people over. But like, wounds from a friend.
Yeah.
Are you a friend?
Yeah. 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 Are you a friend? That's good. Yeah.
You could say some stuff to me and I'll be like, damn, okay.
Yeah.
I got to take it seriously because Chris said it.
Yeah.
somebody else. Who you talking to, bro?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it does depend on the relationship.
matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Relational equity. Yeah. That's fair enough.
And I mean, it seems like the scriptures is implying it matters too.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Yeah.
And I would venture out to say they have a better idea of what it means to be a friend. The scriptures, when it was written, has a better idea of what it means to be a friend to somebody than we do today.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. That's difficult. Maybe that can be a podcast. What does it mean to be a friend, right?
Ooh,
That's
ouch. That's a good
tough,
one.
dude. That's tough, bro.
That's a
I
good
don't
one.
even know if I can.
That's a good one. We should chew on that.
Yeah. But yeah.
All right, bro.
That's tough.
Okay. Well, another episode in the books. Like we always
Sir.
say, it's the beginning of the conversation, not the end. If you want to tap in with us and continue to chop with us more, you know where to find us on social. We appreciate you guys. If this was helpful to you, share it with somebody you know who's engaging with young people too. We're on the same journey as you, trying to figure out how best to engage this next generation with the gospel, how to love them, care for them. And we're just sharing our ideas with you guys as we kind of go. We're figuring it out. And we're excited to journey with you. But we love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.